Hi, my name is Sherry Petrowski. I'm the president of the Littleton Air Spectacle Pond Association, and I want to welcome our viewers today. Today I have Leon Weaver with me, and we will be discussing the basic geography of the pond. Leon, can you start with the basics of the geography of Spectacle Pond?
Yes, this is a map of Spectacle Pond, probably a 20,000 foot view. And the context of this video and discussion is to take a look at the flow of water through Spectacle Pond. The number one note is Bennett's Brook Inlet. And we'll talk about the watershed that supplies this inlet a little later on. There's actually three inputs, major inlets into Spectacle Pond. Number one, Bennett's Brook Inlet. Number two, off to the left, is a swamp pond inlet. Swamp brook, it's called. It should be a brook, but for one reason or another, it's been dammed up and now it's a 30-acre pond. It should not be, but let that go for a minute. The number three notation is the aggregate / Middlesex Material Corp quarry inlet. There's a fascinating thing about this. The quarry, if you will, is a very deep hole in the ground, and you can imagine that aggregate is mining gravel out of that very deep hole, and occasionally the hole fills in with water.
And what do they do about that?
Yeah, exactly. What do they do about that? In order to continue their mining operations, they have to pump it out. And that's the primary flow of water coming out of through number three, notation number three, although there is an associated swampland as well. So one way or another, you would get some flow through that particular stream. And you may, if you have the opportunity to travel along Spectacle Pond Road, you may have noticed that there's in fact some flow underneath part of the road, and that's a culvert setup that's draining that water. So those are the primary inlets, 1, 2, and 3. There's also number 4, which is the Gilson Brook Outlet. And also it's the Route 119 boat launch. A lot of folks that own pontoon boats frequently use that boat launch. And of course, fisher people that come in to the pond will also use that launch. Number 5 notation on the map are the air wells. There's some very expensive renovations that have occurred just recently to get rid of PFAS out of those wells.
Could you tell us a little bit of that?
Yeah, we have there's a PFAS problem in our pond. It's in the groundwater, probably in the pond as water flows through the pond. This PFAS probably was around for the last 10 years anyway. We believe, and this is fairly well substantiated now, we believe that one of the primary inputs of PFAS came from an old tire recycling facility off of Willow Road. We think that's the major input of PFAS into our water. There may be other point sources that also are contributing to our PFAS problem.
And I understand that is a problem nationwide right now.
Oh boy, yeah. There's the old story of it's forever chemicals, and they're everywhere.
Right.
Like 99% of the population on the face of the planet probably has some PFAS in them. And in fact, as studies were conducted to determine who had PFAS, and of course to find out what the point sources of this PFAS was, they discovered that there was a bunch of blood that was gathered from the Korean War, a bunch of our soldiers in the Korean War. So this is in the 1950s, early 1950s.
Right.
And there were no PFAS there.
Oh.
Okay, so it's just...
So what is it in?
It's only been 75 years. It's in lots of stuff. It's in your Burger King wrappers. It's in your Scotch Guard, for your furniture. It's, I believe it may be in some of this slip kind of coating that you have on your pans. And it's certainly one of the bigger contributory factors is the AFFF, which is, I call it the aqueous firefighting foam.
Okay.
That's not exactly the right term, but it's AFFF. And unfortunately, getting back to the tire recycling facility off Willow Road, which we believe is the major contributor of PFAS in our environs here, there was a fire at the tire recycling facility. You probably have heard of tire fires.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Sure have.
they're pretty nasty, very difficult to put out.
Yes.
Turns out AFFF is a good thing to use to put out those fires, except that AFFF has lots of PFAS in it.
It's an environmental effect.
Yeah. So this PFAS, from probably a number of point sources, has gotten into our groundwater. So air was slightly ahead of the curve because they had PFAS issues in some of their ponds in town, and started to investigate their spectacle pond wells as well. And lo and behold, there was PFAS there. The PFAS levels hit 20 parts per trillion, which is the cutoff for the state. It used to be 70 parts per trillion, but now it's 20 parts per trillion. And it's actionable as soon as you're at 20 parts per trillion, excuse me. So they, to the tune of many millions of dollars, they have put in a new facility. We'll drill down into this one of these days on another video.
Another time, yes.
Yeah, they have a beautiful blue building there that gets rid of PFAS. So they're good to go now.
Good.
And it turns out that PFAS has gotten into the wells in and around.
Oh, wow.
You know, because we have private wells surrounding. We don't have water.
Right.
You know, from the town. Private wells have PFAS, and people have undertaken mitigation methods to get rid of the PFAS so that their drinking water is okay. And the town well has PFAS in it, and the town is, and in fact, I think they'll probably turn on this spring our new PFAS water treatment facility on Whitcomb Ave.
Okay.
Yeah, but
Wonderful.
we're not treating for PFAS at the Spectacle Pond wells. We're pumping our water from the Spectacle Pond well over to Whitcomb Ave. You may have noticed that the roads betwixt here and Whitcomb Ave have been torn up, seems like several times, and that was to put in the piping to get Spectacle Pond water over to Whitcomb Ave and to eradicate this PFAS.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So on the map, I think we've hit the three major inlets, 1, 2, and 3.
Right.
We hit the outlet, 4, and we'll speak to that a little bit later on as well.
Okay.
And then the air wells and the Spectacle Pond well that have had this PFAS challenge, if you will. So going back to the inlet, the first picture is this inglorious picture of the actual inlet
Beautiful,
in the
yeah.
Spectacle Pond. It's nice blue water. This water is very pretty. I've been in and around that stream a number of times, and there's actually a dual culvert set up, and I've had to clean out those culverts in the past, and that was a lot of fun. Anybody that wants to help me, buy some waders, and I'll tell you when we need to go down there and clean things out.
As well as, I understand you test the water in these different locations as well.
We do. That happens
so?
to be one of the areas when we do water quality testing with the town, Littleton Water Department. We often test streams and ponds in town. Right now we're more focusing on the ponds. We think we have characterized the streams and potential problems that are associated with contaminations in these streams. You'll notice on this picture of this inlet that there's some fencing there.
Right.
Why do we want to
that
put
for
fencing
there?
in there? Yeah, it's the beaver.
The beavers.
The beaver like to block, and they don't like it that there's a flow of water going through that channel. They would like to block that up, and they have done, as I mentioned in the past. They had fully blocked up not only that culvert, but its sister culvert off to the side. And they built themselves a little pond because Bennett's Brook was not flowing into the pond. It was, contributory factor to another pond that they were impounding and building up.
Those darn little beavers.
Yeah. But this is beautiful. Way back when we did a stream walk with a number of people on the Spectacle Pond Association and walked up this stream several hundred feet.
Wow.
Just to investigate what was there. And there's a few other culverts upstream from that, but I focused on this particular culvert because that is, again, this inglorious input to the pond. The next several pictures are of the outlet, number 4. So there it is on the map, number 4.
Right.
And that's a front-end shot of the dual culverts that are now the primary focus of our outlet.
Okay.
And you'll notice there's my truck parked up above.
Yes,
so you can get a feel for the size of this.
It's pretty massive. Yeah.
It's large. I call it the Boulder Dam of Spectacle Pond.
And where does that go?
This empties out into Gilson Brook that goes down into Lake Maniwaki Forge Pond
Okay.
that eventually feeds the Stony Brook
Okay.
that eventually feeds the Merrimack, and it goes out into the ocean.
Wow. Okay.
And the full hydrologic cycle, of course, is that you get rain and snow and it melts and it goes through the pond, and that's the full loop. It eventually has to make its way out into the Merrimack. Anyway, dual culverts, these are very much sturdier than the previous culvert that was installed in 1995. It was only a single galvanized iron culvert, and unfortunately, over the years, it degraded and eventually collapsed. And in 2010, Spectacle Pond was flooded. In fact, pond level was probably up to about the top of this concrete structure. It went up 8 feet higher than it should have been, and it flooded out a couple of low-lying properties, unfortunately.
Okay.
So those are the two of the dual culverts. This occasionally gets blocked by the beaver as well. Once, I'll
Sounds
show
very
you.
challenging.
I'll show you a picture one of these days of a rowboat that got caught in there.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So why am I whining about this? Well, I'm mentioning this because it's the eternal vigil of monitoring this outlet to make sure that there aren't blockages, because it actually turns out it's very easy to block this outlet. Unlike a couple of other ponds around town, they're much more difficult to block, but we are very susceptible to blockages. So that's the dual shotgun outlet. The next picture, again sticking with the outlet, is if you got down in the water and you looked down through one of those culverts,
What would you see there?
you'd see light at the end of this tunnel. And this is a shot that attempted to portray that there's about 150 foot of culvert that carries this water, the outlet of Spectacle Pond, off into Gilson Brook. So the end of that light tunnel is Gilson Brook, the start of Gilson Brook. And again, Gilson Brook feeds into Maniwaki and Forge Pond.
Okay.
And the next picture is we, the town of Littleton, Spectacle Pond Association, of course, Littleton Clean Lakes Committee, downstream from us, Westford, have been involved in with Mass DEP to improve our stream flow.
Okay. And so what are we looking at there?
That is, in addition to the dual culverts, that is our knife gate valve, our KGV. And this is now it's a 14-inch orifice that we can open and close. In fact, now we can open and close that KGV remotely, which is beautiful.
Wow,
yes,
wonderful.
because sometimes it's very difficult to get down there and to have to play around with something mechanical, especially in the winter. Could be pretty challenging.
Sure.
So we now have remote control. And why did we do this? We wanted to improve stream flow down through the various water bodies in the Stony Brook and out into the Merrimack, because during the summer we're especially challenged. You can imagine we just went through a drought.
Right.
Well, we weren't sending any water out at one point. We didn't have any water to send out. In fact, we had blockages upstream from us. So it's no input, no output, right?
Right.
We weren't getting anything from our watershed.
So in that case, what did we do?
We were unable to send any water downstream. We tried valiantly to improve our upstream input, and also we tried to control the KGV to achieve a certain level of outflow, but eventually the drought won. There's no way we could resist that drought. It was too powerful. I think at one point we were a severe drought, minimally a severe drought.
Right, right.
And that's been improved now. We don't have that problem. You may have noticed that we've received a lot of rain. We actually have a snowpack.
We did in, I think, the month of September, yeah.
Yeah. We were dry. September we got clobbered.
Yes.
Yeah, and it improved and improved and improved. I'll have to look at the more recent maps, but I think we may be out of the drought.
Oh, good.
You can take a look at the drought monitor information, which is snapshotted on a Tuesday, and they display it on a Thursday after 9 o'clock. Go ahead, look at that and see if we're good to go. We should be. And fortunately, we also have, in terms of stream flow, we also have a nice snowpack now. So as that melts in the spring, we'll get some flow.
Yes.
Hopefully we don't get too much of a snowpack, because then that could cause flooding, but we'll cross that bridge.
And what is the importance of keeping the pond and the streams flowing?
The health of the pond is dependent on a flow. It's a flushing mechanism.
Right.
A flow into the pond also helps rejuvenate our groundwater. The spectacle pond wells and the air wells pump out of the groundwater predominantly. That's where they get their water from. So you want to make sure that there's a rich input to that groundwater. And that's primarily a contributory factor of Bennett's Brook and the flow from upstream from us, basically. So there's a nice flushing mechanism that happens there. If you have impurities that are in the watershed, you want to have those flushed out periodically. A steady flow is better. Also, the sort of the canary in the mine is fish. Why do we care about stream flow? Well, we care about stream flow because it provides a healthy biota to downstream, especially from us. And the canary in the mine is fish, and the health of the species and the number of fish that are downstream. You may recall, if you've been in the area, that there was a problem with the Ipswich River, where basically it wasn't a river.
Tell us about that a little.
A lot of times.
Okay.
And that has been somewhat cleaned up now, so that they get a reasonable flow through the Ipswich River. In fact, I think they used to have alewife used to migrate from the ocean to spawn in these rivers. There's one document that I've uncovered that suggested that Spectacle Pond at one time had alewife.
Oh,
and I
my
thought,
goodness.
I'm not so sure about that one. We don't have any today, I'm pretty sure.
Right.
But alewife would have to travel quite a distance and navigate through a number of dams in order to get to us. But they're pretty sturdy. They used to do that hundreds of years ago.
Right.
So, yeah, I'm not the boss of them. They can do whatever they want. And finally, then, the last picture is of the watershed.
The watershed. Tell us about the watershed.
Sure. You have to kind of locate Spectacle Pond, and we've ad nauseum focused in on Spectacle Pond. And it's off to the top of the picture. And there's a flow from Spectacle Pond through Gilson Brook out into Manawanaki and Forage. But further down and to the left, I have numbers 1 and 2. Number 1 is the primary several hundred acre watershed for Bennett's Brook.
Okay.
And you can go to the Shaker Village, the old Shaker Village on Shaker Road, and you could observe a bunch of marshlands and water bodies in and around that area. And that is the headwaters of Bennett's Brook. There's also a secondary, number 2, part of watershed for Bennett's Brook. Sometimes I call it Bennett's Brook 2, secondary Bennett's Brook.
Were they connected at one point, or?
Yes,
they're pretty close
interestingly,
there?
yeah, good segue into that. Yeah, what happens is over time, this connected watershed, 1 and 2 were just one. As people build roads, you can imagine that those roads are elevated in height, and they
Right.
could very well impound water.
Okay.
And that in fact is what has happened. I can one of these days when we do a serious dive down into the watershed, I'll show you one of these impoundments, and you'll go, oh yeah, okay. Usually though, when you build a road, if they're in and around water, you build a road, you want to have a culvert underneath that road.
Right. I
To
was going to
continue the
ask
flow,
about that.
right?
Right. That
If
makes
you don't
sense.
do that, your road's going to get flooded probably, you know. And
Sure.
in fact, some
We
roads,
get a lot of water that year.
yeah, in some roads, people have gone, oh, I'm getting flooded, so they keep building the road up. Well, eventually, Mother Nature's going to win, and they're going to flood that road up, and you're going to go higher and higher and higher, and yeah, it doesn't work. Yeah, you have to work with Mother Nature. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, she's pretty powerful. So,
Very.
yeah, don't do that. Yeah, interestingly, this little connection right between 1 and 2 is a road.
I was going to ask, is it a
Yes.
road? Yes. Okay.
2 is slightly, that water area, that marsh area, is slightly elevated from 1. But if you didn't have the blockage of a road, it would naturally be flowing into 1, and 1 and 2 would be one thing. Yeah. So that is the flow.
Okay. Wonderful.
The flow of Bennett's Brook today empties into a Shaker Mill Pond. And the Shakers used this in the past as a sawmill and a grist mill.
Oh, wow.
And again, when we drill down into the watershed in another video, we'll take a look at the damming structure that they have there. There are blockage opportunities all along the way in Bennett's Brook. Harvard has taken care of some of those blockages by installing beaver deceivers. I've worked with the town of Ayer to install a beaver deceiver. We're hoping to get
Could you
one
tell
more
a
in.
little bit about that?
Yeah, beaver deceivers are, beaver like to block the flow of water perpendicular.
Okay.
So if you can imagine that you have a wall here, and there's a culvert through that wall, and the flow of water is through that culvert. The beaver like to block right there, perpendicular at that flow. But a beaver deceiver kind of confuses the beaver.
How does it do that?
You can put some fencing here and some fencing here.
Okay.
Well, that flow is not perpendicular there. They get confused. You can actually build something of a trapezoidal affair where there's lots of fencing, and over time they get confused and they go, no, I only block perpendicular. They do that very well.
Yes.
Trapezoidal at angles, I don't know what's that all about. That's very confusing. So over time, unfortunately, even a beaver deceiver of that nature can get blocked,
Okay.
because as the flow of water encounters that fencing, you can imagine that the refuse, the flotsam and jetsam, starts building up, and the beaver go, oh, I can block where there's already flotsam and jetsam. I'll block that too. Yes. So they get smarter over time.
Amazing.
And sometimes you have to clear out that blockages, long story short. Anyway, that's one methodology. Another methodology is that you just take an existing beaver dam. So you can imagine there's a dam here. And what you do is you don't destroy the dam, because if you try to do that, the beaver will just build it back up.
Right.
So what you do is you take a pipe, you actually destroy part of the dam, take a pipe and put it back through that area and rebuild the dam. And at the beginning of this pipe, you have a cage where the water can flow into the cage. Refuse doesn't tend to get into that cage, but now you have water flowing through that pipe, and the beaver kind of scratch their heads and they go, how is water going through that pipe? Well, it's actually over here where it's been collected through a pipe, and then So that's a way that we can ensure that we have some flow.
Okay.
And again, harking back to this stream flow work that we do with Mass DEP, Westford, town of Littleton, Littleton Water Department, Littleton Clean Lakes Committee, and SPA for that matter, La SPA. We all want to contribute to better stream flow.
And I understand there's volunteer opportunities for
Yes.
the Clean
Yes.
Lakes Committee as
We
well.
can, yeah. I always need help. We'll discuss that as soon as you raise your hand, but I think I can enumerate a few of the things that.
So if you're interested, please
if you're
consider.
interested,
Yes.
contact Sherry and Leon, and we'll chat about what those opportunities are.
Wonderful.
A big opportunity is monitoring the flow, because we don't have to do anything to improve the flow necessarily, but just to monitor it and determine whether there are blockages there. We would alert the proper authorities,
Right.
and get them to help us unblock. So that's one big opportunity, is monitoring, and I do that compulsively. My wife will always ask me, "Well, where are you going today?" "Well, I'm going to go out and make my rounds." "Oh, your rounds?" "Yeah." I said, "Yeah, there's 9 things I monitor to make sure that the flow is okay." And yeah.
Well, Leon, we're very thankful to have you
Yes,
on
yes. It's
the Spectacle Pond Association.
It's a full-time job. Thank you.
Yes. Well, Leon, we want to thank you today for your time and a lot of good information, and we will see you all next on the Spectacle Pond Association very shortly here. Thank you.